Once again, we are having conversation on Kalchakra Tantra with Shri Niraj Kumar ji. We have a new guest this time, Mr. Ian Baker, the world-famous explorer and author on Tibetan yoga. He studied art, history, literature, and comparative religion at Middleburg College, Oxford University, and Columbia University, and medical anthropology at University College London. He is an international fellow of the Explorers Club and was honored by National Geographic Society as one of the 6 explorers of the Millennium for his ethnographic and geographical field. He is the author of several acclaimed books, including The Tibetan Art of Healing and The Dalai Lama's Secret Temple. Phenomenal author he is. So, today both the scholars will delve into the complexities of Kalchakra Tantra. I hope audience will enjoy this conversation on secrets of King of Tantra. Between two brilliant minds from East and West. Over to Ian.
So it's a great pleasure to be back here in Delhi and to have the opportunity to meet again, as we have every time when I've come through Delhi, to talk about your ongoing work, which has been so inspiring for me for many years. And your work with the Kalacakra Tantra, and as we've discussed, it's one of the last of the great Vajrayana Buddhist tantras to be produced, considered to be the kind of pinnacle of Buddhist thought from the time that it was created. And I'd love to really get your view of what inspired you to take on this monumental work of translating the entirety of the Kalachakra Tantra from the original Sanskrit sources, which up until your work, as far as we know, had not been done.
Thank you very much, Brother Ian Baker, for visiting again. And it's always a pleasure to meet you. And we have been engaged in discussing over Vajrayana for last few years. And this is the first time that we are publicly talking about our romance with Kalchakra Tantra. So, this romance, my own romance with Kalchakra Tantra, I think that goes back to the year 2014. At that time, when I was trying to work it out, what exactly Nalanda tradition. I come from Magad region, and we are, since our childhood, we are so much enamored by Nalanda monastery, the ruins of Nalanda, 10,000 teachers, students, 1,000 teachers, and so many myths about Nalanda. In 2014, when Nalanda University was being revived, the new Nalanda International University, the thought came to me that what is in Nalanda University, the building complexes, or what is some kind of a special knowledge for which people used to come here. And at that time only, I think in 2014, I came across the Sanskrit text of Kalchakra Tantra. And later I purchased the copy Asiatic, which Asiatic Society has published in 1985. This was edited by Vishwanath Banerjee. When I got that book, purchased that book, the feeling came, this exactly is the Nalanda tradition. Thereafter, when I started reading the Kalchakra Tantra, I came to, I became more firm that Kalchakra Tantra was the climax of Nalanda tradition. In fact, it was the capsule of Nalanda tradition. So Nalanda tradition is not in the buildings. Nalanda tradition is in that kind of synthetic philosophy which Kalchakra propounded by incorporating views from Hinduism, from Jainism, even something from Islam, from Greek sources. So it was that kind of holistic system of knowledge. So for me, this Kalchakra Tantra is nothing else but Nalanda tradition in origin. And that made me to, that by studying this text only, I can understand what exactly constituted Nalanda tradition.
And it's very exciting what you're saying is that because the Kalachakra Tantra itself was so synchronistic in the sense that it was drawing together not just different schools of Buddhist thought, but also Hindu thought, Jaina thought, as well as even
from Islam
and Greek thought. So it made it actually a complete kind of synthesis of the knowledge of that
Yes,
time. And
yes.
so you're saying, in that sense, Nalanda
Mm.
was representing that very, you could say, very holistic sense of what the Kalachakra embodied
Yes.
by pulling together all of the pre-existing tantras, sutras, as well as other traditions. And it makes Nalanda sound like, in theory, that it was a very open, very inclusive
Yes.
approach to transmitting knowledge, and that
Yes.
the Buddhist tradition was part of that.
Yes.
That was part of what really
Yes,
must
yes,
have inspired
yes,
you.
yes.
Anyway.
And in fact, Kalchakra Tantra does not only engage it with yoga or tantra. You have got very rich section on geography, on alchemy, on aromatic science, even on erotics.
Mhm.
So on dramaturgy, and if you say thanatology, the science of death,
Mhm.
it has got almost the Ayurveda.
Mhm.
So, more than if you say more than 30 different kind of disciplines, and that has been integrated into this text.
Mhm. So it's incredible. So even though, as you dated, I think, to the second decade of of the 11th century, in terms of
No, third decade of
the third.
but it has started in the second,
Okay,
third decade.
That's right. So the 1020s.
1020. Yes.
Right, exactly. And it makes it so, because it was really a compilation of the state of knowledge
Yes.
in the Indian subcontinent at that time,
Mhm.
according to all the traditions.
Yes.
So, and so the whole overall structure of the work that you've been working on, this is the volume,
This
there's
is
only
a-
volume one.
This is a volume one, and this volume runs into 685 pages. This is a volume one.
Yeah.
So, in fact, there are 5 sections in the Kalchakra Tantra. It has been termed as Patal. Patal is also curtain.
Mhm.
In a way, 5 curtain regions are there. And for each Patal, I have devoted one volume.
Mhm.
So that is how 5 volumes are going to come. And this is comprehensive in the sense, like what I have done, I have taken it from the Sanskrit text only, and thereafter transliteration. Then I have also separated each word of Sanskrit. That was very tough. What you say, pad bhanjan in Sanskrit.
Mhm.
Okay, like and then giving meaning to each word in Sanskrit. Thereafter the translation, and then my commentary. So say for one verse also you need at least 2 to 3 pages,
Mhm.
and there are 1047 verses in this Kalchakra Tantra. So at least you need 2300 pages to complete the translation and commentary. Uh, but in fact, the whole project runs into 2700 plus pages, and I'm also planning. Can we add one, say, the postscript after the 5th volume and conclude what exactly is the gist of all the 5 volumes?
That'd be great. I think a lot of people would appreciate that grand summary,
Yes.
as you're referring to. So the second, are you translating all of it in a rough form already, so that you see the overall structure of the tantra,
Yes.
and then going in
Mm.
to focus on each of the patala
Yes,
and
yes.
finish each
Yes.
file? When should people expect the second one to come out?
What happened? Like I translated the first patal in 2017 only,
Mm-hmm.
and thereafter, when it was sent to the publisher, then I decided to write a preface that turned out into an introduction. And introduction finally it consumed 1 year because it runs into 225 pages. Then when the COVID came, I had sufficient time at home to do the translation and commentary. So I translated all remaining 4 volumes. Like all 1047 verses have been translated and commented upon. But bringing out all the volumes at one go, I thought that is not a better strategy, because it's a very complicated work. My first volume has been published in 2022 March. Now second volume has gone for print, and I'm expecting in early 2024 we should have the second volume. The editing of third volume is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect the whole project to be completed by the end of 2025, but not before that.
I would think it would take at least that.
Yeah, and because like number of verses in each patal is going to increase. In first volume, it was only 169 verses stanza. In second, it is 180. In third, it will go to 203, and in fourth 230 stanzas. But in the final volume, fifth volume, there are 261 stanzas. So for me, like each volume is going to consume more time in editing and finally, and there are certain things which we need to revise also. What I translated in 2020 or 21. But once you start editing and other volumes start coming up, then you know like something needs to be revised. So like even for second volume, I had to devote almost 4 or 5 months in revising many of the translations that were coming to.
And the translation, as we know with Tantra, is so complex because sometimes, at least in some of the Tantras, the meaning is kind of coded or it's hidden in the so-called Sandabhasa, twilight language. But I was wondering, because of the Kalacakra Tantra trying to be, in a sense, such a compendium of knowledge at the time, is it also working a lot with Sandabhasa or twilight language, or is it more explicit in terms of the meaning of the Sanskrit terms?
I think Kalchakra Tantra is more coded than other Tantra. Because here you also have got mathematical aspects. So what I say, like if there are 4 kaya, okay, so I say there may be another kaya in Buddhism, and that is mathematical kaya, which Kalchakra propounds. So what happens when you have mathematics and that too is coded, then the text becomes more difficult. Because here they what the author is doing, he is trying to establish correspondence between numbers, concepts, and the physical reality also. So it's and then linguistics also. It had to be connected at so many levels, and then at every level it is coded. Say there we all know in Kalchakra Mandala there are 722 deities, which is quite popular, the Kalchakra side mandala. In fact, it is 721 because the central deity, the male Kalchakra and Vismata, they are in Advaya, non-dual. So it is 720 plus 1, 721. But the text says that in Adi Buddha Tantra, there are 1620 deities in the Grand Mandala. But they are not saying 1620. What they are saying, it is Kha, Kar, Nipati. Now, Kha is a space that represents number 0, Kar is hands that represent number 2, and Nipati is king, which has got 16 guna, so it is the number 16. And then you have to read it in the reverse. Though it is 0 to 16, you have to read it in reverse, that becomes 1620. So this is the Bhu Sankhya's kind of notation, which was quite popular in after 6th century AD in the Indian astronomy. So see, here you don't know whether they are talking about Kha as a space, Kha as Sunyat, or Kha as a number 0. Or Kar may be the Kar of deity, or Kar can be number 2. So every stanza, there is lot of coding, and you have to connect it from the other parts of the
you
text.
have to look into the context to make sure that the word you're translating is one that's accurate.
And I think they did it intentionally because for Buddhists, like they didn't believe in what Aspotvad, the Vedic philosophy of meaning, whether meaning is essential part of a word. Okay, that was the Bhaltari theory of Aspotvad. What they said ki no, meaning is not inherent in a word. Meaning depends upon the context, on interdependence. So even in meaning, they have applied the Buddhist philosophy of interdependence. So this is how it is different from, so I think they selected this kind of coded language only to show that no word has an inherent meaning.
Very interesting. So we're looking at that whole idea that nothing has inherent meaning. Even
Yes.
words themselves are ambiguous.
Yes.
But that must make it so challenging as a translator
Yes.
to see that each word has to be looked at in the total context in order to be, and also to take into account knowledge in other fields of Indian thought, philosophy,
Yeah.
in order to give the right meaning. So I wondered, independent of your translation, which you've worked on so hard to make it as accurate as possible in terms of the meaning, but has that led you to discover in earlier translations where the meanings sometimes were completely, in your idea or in your perspective, maybe misguided or just completely wrong because they were being translated out of context from the entirety of the Tantra as a whole? So have you come across some areas where there have been, let's say, inherited errors that perhaps have just kind of trickled down as a result of translators not knowing the full context?
Yes. Let us talk first about Vimal Prabha itself.
Okay.
Because Vimal Prabha was the first commentary, and that, like I have established in the introduction, that the text was written by none other than Naropa. And Naropa in his Sekodesh Tika, he is citing Vimal Prabha. So that means Vimal Prabha was written the commentary of this text during his time only. So this is very interesting that the commentary as well as the text both came almost simultaneously.
Right.
So I have dated that also. But even that Vimal Prabha commentary written by Kalki Pundarik, that is not complete. So people say it's complete in that sense, like if I come to the fifth patal, Gyan Patal, so more than 40% of the stanzas have not been commented upon, and that is the most complex part. And what I have hypothesized, that because it was very technical, therefore Sekodesh, which was a part of the fifth patal, Naropa himself thought of, commenting upon a part of fifth patal because it was very technical. Then, when we see overall text, so Vimal Prabha has not commented upon more than 23% of the text. So that means it was not complete. And when you see even in the first patal, which is very mathematical, it is on computation of planetary positions and by the current astronomy system. So there it is not explaining the stanzas clearly. What I have done, I have commented upon each and every stanza, all 1047. Therefore, it is quite different from Vimal Prabha also. And also I have done the Pajbhanjan because I have separated each word of Sanskrit and given its meaning, that contextual meaning, and that was tough. To annotate is a very challenging task in Sanskrit language. When we come to the modern times, so Mifam's commentary, when I went through his 2 volumes which have been published in English, so I found it's not that kind of in-depth explanation of the stanza. It's not like that. Newman is cited as the person who who translated the commentary as well as the text of the Kalchakra, the first chapter. And he completed his PhD during 1980, John Newman. But the thing is, he had only translated up to 27 stanzas, first 27, and then the last section 149 to 169. And he has said that remaining is very simple, though from stanza 28 it is purely mathematical because it's astronomical section. So this is very complicated. But he has written in his PhD that it is very simple and easy to follow. Then Edward Henning, who was a Jonang scholar and who worked, as you know, in Bokar in Monarchy for quite a long time. He was a great mathematician and he devoted his lifetime in understanding Kalchakra mathematics. And his book Kalchakra and Tibetan calendar, when that has been very useful to me. But he also translated from up to verse 52 only. And while the mathematical section goes till verse 89. So for me, what the earlier commentator, it may be John Newman, so I don't think he did justice to the first chapter, even though people say he translated the first chapter, but actually he did not translate. It was only 27 and 47 verses. The later section, Kalki section is quite easy, but the toughest part was from verse 28 to verse 148, which he didn't, which he skipped. Similarly, Vesna had done some, or she had translated from Tibetan. She had just translated the Vimal Prabha section, and because Vimal Prabha itself is not complete translation. Therefore, those lacunas are reflected in her translation also. Then I know Jensen Anderson, she did translation of the chapter, third chapter, but even she had not explained anything. It's just plain translation from Vimal Prabha commentary at the stage, yeah. So it was also not complete. Like even in the third volume which I am doing, I've been using a lot of graphic, trying to explain everything. Because if you see in Kalchakra, what is interesting, even the this kund, where you do the offering, fire offering operation, kund. So even kund are of 8 kinds. They are trying to fit kunda into sacrificial, altar, into the Buddha's philosophy, teachings. Then if you see even the tantric practices, Maran, Uchchatan and Akarsan, these kind of things, that is also 8 kinds. So I am trying to fit in all these classification into the grand Buddhist philosophy, which was the intention of the original composer. But the commentators, I won't say commentators, the translators, they have not done justice, because rather than only translating, say, a part of Vimal Prabha, they should have also explained it.
Yeah, and so there wasn't that. And so, for example, in the Tibetan system, Mipam's commentary, was there, what you say was incomplete, but after Mipam, were there other efforts to try to actually give a more comprehensive explanation of the various stanzas that you've been going through it, translating in such great depth and giving commentary and context for it? Was there ever that kind of initiative taken in the Tibetan tradition?
No, I don't think in the 20th century then any that kind of attempt was done. When I was in Dharamsala this year, and I met Sandong Rinpoche ji, as well as the director of Library of Tibetan Work and Archive, Gese Lagdol. And I was asking same thing. I wanted to have a discussion with some Tibetan scholars of Kalacakra Tantra. And we talked for quite long, and we were trying to find out which Tibetan scholars might have done work on that. And finally, I was told that there had been one Rinpoche, Jado Rinpoche ji, which had done some work, but he had not done any extensive commentary, and now he's based in Mongolia. He's more into preaching rather than scholarly
investigation.
And when I go to Sarnath, the Central Institute of Himalayan Tibetan Studies, so there are, I have not found any work on Kalchakra, but they have done a good thing, like they have compiled some of the minor texts of Kalchakra literature, the Sanskrit text, and that they have published in 2 volumes, and those are very, very useful. Like Avyakar Gupta's Kalchakra Avatar, and these have been published by Central Institute of Himalayan Tibetan Studies. But I don't find anyone there had done work. And this Sanaj Institute, they published the Vimal Prabha commentary. But they published, and it had not been explained. It's just manuscript has been published. So Professor S.S. Bahulkar, he was involved, and then there were some Sanskrit Sanskrit scholars involved. They have done a great, work for the mankind that they made available Vimal Prabha in a book form. And similarly, Ascetic Society had done a great work for us that Vishwanath Banerjee devoted almost 30 years in bringing out after collating from 15 editions this Sanskrit manuscript of Kalchakra.
Yeah, so it's really, the structure of what you've done has never been really attempted before, to do it in such a comprehensive way. And basically, interpreting, not just translating, and giving people that kind of context. And I think that's what's been exciting. Some of the kind of key concepts and words in the Kalachakra, for example, you mentioned last time how we know that the whole structure of the Kalachakra Tantra is kind of put into the context of Shambhala, of this legendary sort of Buddhist kingdom, which will, in a certain sense, come to take the world. But as you said, you've been able to, by looking at the etymology of the root Sanskrit terms, you're able to see kind of outer, inner, and secret meanings to even the idea of Shambhala as a kind of participle dimension that, as I recall, is there kind of the Shambhala behind the forehead in the skull, the Kabbalah, which is kind of the center. Could you explain something a little bit more about that? Because I think it's just one example of a key word that people have kind of an outer understanding of or an outer interpretation of, but not looking at how it actually is relating, in the same way that the body has these different levels, so too does some of these key concepts that relate to the body, like Shambhala. What was exactly your discovery with that?
Like this Kalchakra became so popular in Western scholarship during first half of 19th century, and later it was taken up by Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophists. So from there, this concept of Shambhala and Kalki king, it percolated down not only to the Western scholarship but even to the Tibetan followers. And Shambhala, people think Shambhala is some kind of hidden land, hidden geographical land. Even His Holiness Dalai Lama ji was escaping from the communist takeover of Lhasa. So it is said that he was going towards Shambhala, where in the west towards Arunachal Pradesh, and then he entered Jenithang area. And he came to this part of. But people say that some Tibetans managed to go to the Beyul, Pemako, which you are credited with for discovery near the Great Bend of
the Sampo.
River Sanpo. So people think Shambhala is some kind of hidden land where when you reach, then there is no problem and it's all peaceful. It's earthly hidden. But Shambhala is not only in that sense. What Kalchakra has been talking about, they are talking about Sambhu. And this term Sambhu is also an epithet for Shiva. But Sambhu means, the peace, complete, total peace.
Right.
So Shambhala is derived from Sambhu plus Alay, Sambho plus Alay, the house of peace. A place which is, serene, peaceful, people are happy, they are sharing everything, shared prosperity. That is Shambhala for the Kalchakra. And therefore, when we see in Kalchakra, they are always talking about, first they say, first you go for posan. Posan means nourishment. Like you have to have the prosperity, economic development, everything. Then you go for tosan. Tosan means satisfaction. So first posan, then tosan, contentment, then only you attain peace, Sambhu. So Shambhala is in a way a utopian place where we have economic prosperity, people are happy, contented and peaceful. So this is a dream, and this is not only a dream for spiritual masters, but also for the political philosophy also.
Sure.
So this is a dream of mankind.
Yeah.
So that ultimate dream is Shambhala. But on the other hand, we have hidden meanings also. Shambhala is also, if I should say, lies in the forehead, within our body. And then in one of the talks when Khenpo Rinpoche ji organized from his doctrine, so there Sambala, I have discussed that there is also mathematical Sambala, and then I established that pi, that irrational number pi, that is the mathematical Sambala.
Okay.
So Sambala is at several levels,
Mm.
but what people say geographical Sambala, basically that is a utopia.
Yeah.
And for that everyone had to work. And therefore Kalchakra in very first stanza, what it says that Yogam Shri Kalchakre Kalyug Samye Mukti Heto Narana. Narana means for men. That this Kalchakra Yoga during this time of Kali Yuga, it is for for a total liberation of all the mankind.
Mhm.
So this Kalchakra Tantra is meant to establish a planetary Sambala.
Mhm.
It is not going to be a just little hidden Sambala.
Right.
They are
It's
talking
actually
about the complete
larger-
mankind.
Mhm.
So they are envisioning a planetary Sambala.
Mhm.
So this is the beauty of this text.
Yeah, it's a beautiful image. And there's also, as you said, sort of an anatomical Shambhala. That was where you were talking about
Yes.
the light in the forehead.
Yes.
So the Shambhu meaning Shiva, but
Yeah.
also
Peace.
Shiva being that pure consciousness which exists
Yes.
within our,
Yes.
we could
Yes.
say within our
Yeah.
sort of psychoanatomy.
Yes.
So no, that's what's wonderful and exciting is these layers and within layers that you've been able to bring out and to share. And that really, and as you said, your commentary, which is so much more comprehensive than any of the earlier attempts, and I think that's where your grand summary will be so interesting at the end to sort of see what are these key concepts, how do they, and this is the question I had when we think about how the Kalachakra has been transmitted, let's say, within the Tibetan context over the last few decades, or let's say from earlier in the 20th century, by the Panchen Lama and then by the Dalai Lama. It's more the people receiving it or receiving it more as a blessing. This idea that when they die, they'll be reborn in Shambhala, they'll get the blessings in this life, prosperity. But it's not, but then at the same time, there's such a rich yogic practice that you said involves everything from ascetic disciplines to dark retreats to eroticism to substances and an incredibly complex process of inner alchemy that it seems from the number of people who are initiated into Shambhala, the amount of people who actually practice it as a yogic practice is probably not even 1%. And so I'm curious about how you see that, the repurposing of the Kalachakra Tantra for mass sort of blessings versus, say, esoteric yogic practice that transforms our own psychophysical organism, and then with the carry-on effect of transforming the world through transforming ourselves. So I wonder what you've come across, both in the literature as well as in your experience, about those aspects of as a blessing ceremony versus a yogic practice.
This blessing ceremony, in fact, this is only a product of early 20th century. And I should not go into the politics of Kalchakra public rituals. It's quite known now. Many scholars have been working on that. But Kalchakra is not only, this sand mandala and having a darshan of sand mandala, that ceremony. So one had to do lot of practices also. Now, the proponents of the public ceremony, what they say, that once we can give public ceremony for 7 lower initiations. Now there are 11 initiations in Kalchakra. Now we have to understand even that. Why 11? Why it is not 12? Why it is not 15? Why it is not 6? Okay, why 11? Because in Pratyaksh Samutpad model, there are 12 link of causations. So if you break 11, then the last is automatically, you don't get this Mara and Jara Maran. You don't age and you don't die. So therefore, these 11 initiations are basically, to control one of each 11 chains.
In that chain
Yeah.
of dependent origination.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
So now the first 7 they say it is Lockic. So that can be given publicly.
Mhm.
And then there are 3 higher initiations. So say first 7 have been discussed in the third patal.
Mhm.
The Stanza 99 of the third patal lists those 7 initiations. And then the higher 3 initiations that is being discussed in the fourth patal, very first stanza discussed. But the last initiation is Mahamudra, that is in the fifth Gyan patal,
Mhm.
Mahamudra initiation. So see, we cannot bring separation that these 7 rituals are separate from other 4.
Right.
So that kind of separation, how it came, whether there is any, a philosophical basis behind that, so that is not clear to me because I've been going through a lot of literature. So I think if you are an initiate into Kalchakra, you have to go from 7 to next 3 and ultimately to Mahamudra.
The Mahamudra, which is the 11th or the 12th?
11th.
11th, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because after Mahamudra there is no need.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That is the culmination.
So that separation, because, and this is strange because Kalchakra talks about unifying
Mhm.
different ranks, unifying different kulas, unifying different races.
Mhm.
It talks about unifying 96 races under Kalki, unifying different epistemic horizons,
Mhm.
and then now in the name of initiation, how can we separate this 7 from other 4?
Right. But there's nothing in the
No.
text that indicates those as preparatory, that
Yes,
they're
yes.
actually all part of a
All
single
part of
sequence.
this. So I think if someone is getting initiation, so if he or she had to move from 7 to next 3 to the last Mahamudra.
So, in accordance to the original text, when the Kalachakra initiation was given, which, as you explained, was only once a year, the full moon, and what would now be February or so
Yeah.
in the winter, would that initiation actually include all of those 11 different
No.
stages,
No.
or would it only be?
No. Because that has been given in the third chapter, third patal, the verse 5 and 5 to 7. So they talk about the timing of giving these 7 initiations. Now this sand mandala, they say all these Lockic 7 initiations, this worldly initiations, can be given through this sand mandala. So sand mandala basically that represents the 7 initiations.
Okay. The outer ones.
But that had to be prepared on the 13th day, and then initiation had to be given only on the full moon of the first lunar month of the year, that is the Chat month.
Chat.
And this is given in the text itself.
Mhm.
Now, if we try to innovate and deviate from that, it's up to the person, but then it is not the original Kalchakra Tantra.
Yeah, and you kind of lose the meaning. But it's very interesting. You said the first 7 initiations were connected to the sun mandala as a initiatic sort of space.
Yeah.
But then what about the remaining ones?
Remaining one, there is no timing given.
Okay.
No timing given. First you get that, and then it depends upon the competence of the disciple as well as guru.
Mm-hmm.
And Kalchakra is very interesting in the sense that in the third chapter, it talks about identifying a true guru.
A true guru.
Not only what should be the qualities of a good student, but also what should be qualities of a good guru.
Mm-hmm.
That is there. And then they also come over to Mulapatti.
Mm-hmm.
So they are discussing about 14 Mulapatti. And they very interesting thing, because they say you have to pay respect to every woman. In a way, it was very gender sensitive also.
Mm-hmm.
And this was something unheard of during that time.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to pay respect to every woman. So it's a complete different kind of Vinaya.
Yeah.
Because you have to. It's not only that disciple had to be like this, that. Even guru had to be like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But how many of current generation are able to test the gurus also on the parameters which Kalchakra Tantra
Probably
mentions?
very few at all. And one of the things that you said about that, I mean, and as you said, those deeper initiations were very demanding. They were some of the 7 Vajra Yogas, for example, some of which involved going into dark retreats and the tumo, the inner fire, and many inner kind of alchemical practices. And it seemed a lot of those practices, from what I understood from your introduction, that this was not a monastic system. It was actually a yogic system, and that when Somanatha, who brought it from India, if I'm correct, to Tibet, was himself a householder, a yogi. And so the whole, in a certain sense, the character and qualities of the transmission of the Kalachakra maybe changed. Maybe originally in Jonamba, that was sort of a mix of the yogic and the monastic. But it does seem that there was a kind of change in the whole packaging of Kalachakra after being brought from India in the 11th century to Tibet. Would you say that that's the case?
Yes. The Kalchakra Tantra, it was meant for, for everyone.
Yeah.
Because, like just we discussed that in the very first sloka, it says it is meant for, liberation of whole mankind. And this yoga can be practiced by everyone.
Right.
But once it went into, first it went to the Mongol court, to the court of Kublai Khan. And at that time, it was the Sakya scholars who were carrying this teaching. And then Orgenpa, who was a Drukpa monk, he was a Kalchakra exponent, and his guru, Gosanpa. And then Karmapa sect, they picked up. So later it was picked up by the Bodongpa, and Jonans were practicing. So at that time only, when in Mongol court, it was not monastic. So from India, when it went to Mongol court also, it was not monastic.
Right.
But slowly, when monasticism grew in Tibet also, from mid of the late 15th century, if you say, then the nature of the, I think, Kalchakra transmission is also changing. Interestingly, the last Indian Pandita who went to Tibet, that was a Kalchakra master, Van Ratna. And he went to Tibet 3 times during late 15th century. So see, Van Ratna, he was a householder. But at the same time, when teaching from India was dwindling in the late 15th century, at the same time, monasticism was on rise in Tibet, and maybe because of competitive factors also for carving out their own area of domination. So then once the root, Indian root, it got dealing from Indian root after Van Ratna. Then it turned into pure monastic form.
Right, it took a different shape, a different flavor. So it's very interesting, as you say, with the sort of gender equality that the Kalachakra is promoting. We see in some of the tantras, and scholars have been critical or certainly recognizing that in some of the more esoteric practices involving sexual alchemy and things like that, it's been criticized because it's always from a male androcentric perspective about appropriating energies from the female. But do we see, as we do see in some of the practices in Tibet, that it actually, these same practices, which are practices for women in order for their own spiritual advancement, rather than, as you could say, just as supports for male adepts? Do we see anything explicitly in the Kalachakra about that, and that are promoting women in a sense that there are practices that are perhaps presented differently for women to practice? Or is it sort of one size fits all?
It's one size fits all here also. But I must say, just like in Kalchakra Mulapati, they say you respect all the women. When in the middle of 15th century, this Bodong master, Bodong Panchin Choki Nangyal, so he was a great Kalchakra master, and he wrote almost 137 volumes, 1000 texts, many of them on Kalchakra. So he also taught the first Dalai Lama and first Panchen Lama with Kalchakra. He started the first, female transmission line of reincarnation in Tibet.
Okay.
So that means Kalchakra system was giving a lot of space to women also.
Yeah, in that respect. And probably maybe on another level, that in terms of the esoteric practices, it may have had as all the traditions did, a kind of oral commentarial dimension that maybe goes even beyond the text. Is that something that you've felt? Because we always know generally with the Tibetan the tantras that what's written is not the full story.
The text itself said that. This text had two different transmissions. One was textual transmission, which was given to Pundarik, who composed Vimal Prabha.
Right.
But then there was another transmission, that was secret transmission, that went from Suryarat. So that secret transmission, I am told by some of the Jonang master, that is being practiced by Jonangs.
Okay.
That is not in text.
Right.
So for that, naturally one had to go to Jonang master, and particularly I think in Jenithang region of Tibet, Amdo.
Right.
So this Jonang tradition is very strong, and they have got very grand monastery where you have got Kalchakra Mandal. They have been following that.
A more oral transmission of it, which
transmission,
would use the text as a foundation, but perhaps have certain other secret teachings that go beyond it.
Which went through Suryarat.
With what, sir?
From Suryarat.
Suryarat.
So the text says, Kalchakra Tantra.
Yeah.
The last, when you go to the epilogue, original text. So it is mentioning that for commentary, the transmission is going to Pundarik.
Very interesting.
But the secret one, it is going to Surya.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a whole nother, for your final volume, we'll have to go and collect the oral transmission and see, what that adds to, from their perspective, how that alters some of the understanding of others. I think, it's so interesting today, we face so many environmental crises in the world. I was wondering, is there kind of a prophetic dimension to the Kalacakra Tantra? Does it sort of anticipate? I mean, obviously, it anticipates a lot of the sociological crises that were happening at that time in the Indian subcontinent, and sort of invasions and rivalries between different religious traditions, for example, philosophical schools, even though we're trying to bring together. But there was also obviously another aspect to that. But I was wondering, is there anything in the Kalachakra Tantra that speaks about environmental crises that we see, for example, in the world today? Or is that not part of it?
No, it's not part of the Tantra. I haven't seen in any of the sloka. But it talks about, when it talks in the Kalki section of the first patal, it talks about Sambala, where, new grains will come up, new kind of food grains, and you will have trees with everlasting fruits.
Right.
That is what, because it is talking about a place of abundance.
Yeah, a paradise.
Paradise.
Right. So
but otherwise on the environment and ecological
I'm just curious if there was anything along those lines. And as you mentioned, there's a whole idea of death and responses to death and ways of overcoming. We spoke last time about this idea of the cycles of time and how the practice is about reaching that timeless moment, that timeless experience in which, in a certain sense, you transcend time and you even and therefore stop, the aging process. Things that we associate with Shambhala, hidden lands like Nebeyu and Shangri-La, where aging is halted through a certain kind of psychophysical, alchemical process. And is that something that you see in the Kalachakra Tantra, talking, about death and overcoming death? Is that part of
Yes,
this
in my second volume,
perspective?
I have devoted almost a 60-page long section on, this death only. And in fact, I have also made public the yogic practices of, first identifying when bad signs for death are arising, the Arish sign, and how you can reverse
those.
those bad signs, and you can prevent death. Apart from that, there are also methods that you can, by manipulating your breath and prana and visualization technique, you can short circuit
The death process,
itself.
the dying itself.
So that is a long section in my second volume, which is going to
I
come
look forward to that.
early 2000.
And in that regard, when we see that from the time of the Kalachakra to the time the appearance of the Bardo Toda, the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead, was several hundred years. And I'm wondering, was there anything in the Kalachakra Tantra that talks about what happens to the mind after death? Does it talk about anything that we can see as a kind of precursor to the more elaborate discussions of the Bardos? The stages that after death, that the mind passes through before rebirth. Does it talk about death and rebirth at all? Which is, I think, very interesting that it doesn't.
It doesn't talk about it.
That's what I was anticipating. And which is interesting because it covers so many other things, but it talks about reversing death, but not about speculating on what happens after death. I think that in itself is very...
Because it is not, it is talking about preventing death itself.
Yeah.
Making you younger. Therefore, it is not talking about,
What's gonna happen
after death.
Right, exactly.
Its goal is different.
Right.
And what is Bardo? Basically, the Bardo is like Antaral. It is basically an architectural concept. First is architectural concept of Antaral king. From your Garbhagriha to, pavilion, that gap, that is called Antaral. So similarly, from birth, next birth and this death, that gap, that Antaral, that in Tibetan, that became Bardo. But for Kalchakra, that is not the goal.
Yeah.
For them, this planet had to be turned into Sambhala, the body had to be turned into Vajradev, and it had to be a Buddha Kshetra where everyone is 16 years young like you.
No, it's a beautiful concept, and I love that aspect of it being something that's more, pragmatic and practical, even if it's harder to attain. But it's not just about speculating on, what happens. Even the whole idea of rebirth, the fact that it doesn't give attention to that, I think, is actually puts us back into the responsibility we have as human beings in this life now.
Yes.
And as you said last time, talking about, we have this precious human birth, but rather than looking at it in a negative sense, it's impermanent, it's going to die, we actually, it's through the enjoyment, through the pleasure principle, that we actually come into that fullness of being in which we're no longer concerned about. We go beyond that trajectory between life and death. We go into the timelessness of living fully in the present and to make the best of our current circumstances. So that to me, seems a very positive view. So I think it's extremely exciting that we're only seeing the first volume and that we have many more to come.
Let us show to our audience.
Really to go through this it's a treasure house, and even just from your cover there, the mathematics, and it's like one ring within another. I think is extremely exciting. So I look forward to my future visits to Delhi, and probably there'll be two books on the table rather than one. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for this exciting conversation.
Yeah, well, it was.
And you not only that you are explorer of death, you yourself are practicing, reversing death. Thank you.
Well, it's something we're all engaged with. But thanks again.
So, it has always been said that flow of knowledge has always traveled from east to west. Unsung India Foundation is thankful to Mr. Ian Baker and Niraj Kumar ji for their precious time. What an interesting talk that was between two scholars. To listen to more such stories on Kalchakra, kindly subscribe this page. We promise to share more such insight. Jai Hind.